good, baby. It was all...
So if you're ready to break the generational cycle of poverty, revolving prison doors, and a lack of education that's holding us all back, then now's the time to do something about it. So to move from gutter to greatness, it all begins with a change in mindset. Here's your host, Dr. Paul Miller.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode from the Gutter to Greatness, G2G. We are here to talk about education as the new form of civil rights and really just how we are on a quest for social justice through education. And there is nobody that I couldn't think of that would be better for this show than my brother here, Nakia Douglas. I think he was just talking to a great civil rights leader, Dr. Bernard Lafayette. We'll talk about that a little bit too. And hey, this brother is deep in the movement, has been for a very long time, has done some amazing things in education, has done some things that other people wish that they could do, and he does them well and does them at a high level and is still doing them. And we will give this brother his just dues. I will let him introduce himself, tell us who you are, what do you do, what's your why, give us the real deal. Remember, you're on Gutter to Greatness, so it's okay to be a little gutter on here because we all working towards our greatness, brother. So let's hear who you are.
Well, thank you, Brother Paul, for this opportunity. It's been a while since we've been together. Proud of your work, proud of this platform that you are creating a new voice and a new season for us to bring along the next generation of leaders. My name is Nakia Douglas. I'm currently the Executive Director of Trio and Pre-Collegiate Programs at the University of North Texas at Dallas. I'm a son of Dallas, specifically a son of South Dallas, born and raised in what would historically be a neighborhood and or community where stereotypically I shouldn't be here. But through the prayers, through a village, but more importantly, the insistence and expectations of not only my mom and the elders, I am who I am. Graduated from Lincoln High School in Dallas ISD, majored in elementary education at Livingstone College, which actually recruited Black males into education. Began my career as a kindergarten teacher in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And from there, found my faith again, moved back to Dallas, taught first and fourth grade, met my wife, left Dallas again, began my administrative career in Georgetown and in Pflugerville, Texas, South Texas, for those who are not familiar, Central Texas, for those who aren't familiar with it. And then moved back to Dallas, back in my old neighborhood again, this time as an administrator. And immediately after that, I became campus principal at the ripe old age of 29 years old. Elementary principal at Maynard Jackson Vanguard School, was the elementary principal for 2 years. Hurricane Katrina hit. They asked me to close down the elementary school and open it up as the middle school. I was at the middle school for 1 year and then was asked to go to the high school. So I literally looped with my students as an elementary, middle, and high school principal in the same community. Did turnaround work there at the high school, and we were able to turn that campus around in about 3 years. And then I was asked to become and start the All-Male Leadership Academy at BF Durrell, which is now known as the Barack Obama Male Leadership Academy in Dallas ISD. Did quite well with that in 5 years. We actually earned blue ribbon status. The graduating classes each year average about anywhere between $10 and $14 million on an average of about 30 students. And then was there for 6 years and then became an executive director of the South Oak Cliff feeder pattern, where I went from serving one campus to supporting 12 principals, about 6,800 students. Did that work and then had a campus partnership or community partnership with the University of North Texas at Dallas. And they were starting a new department. I wanted to branch more into the school districts and the community. And therefore, I became the executive director of Trio and Pre-Collegiate Programs. A long story short, regardless of those titles, I'm still innately that kindergarten teacher who just believes in creating and molding the next generation of students through the power of education.
Amen, brother. That's good stuff. Now, I have to tell you, I met this brother when I went to visit the Obama Academy, and there was not too many schools that I saw that in this country that were doing a better job than the Obama Academy. Now, being someone who has ran an all boys academy as well, and has tried to do it on a very high level, there was so much that I was able to learn and take away from you out there. So I'm appreciative and I'm grateful because I learned a tremendous amount from you on our visit that I was able to bring back and implement and, beg, borrow, and steal because of things that I was able to see and learn to try to. I think you like to say iron sharpens iron. That's one of your sayings, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
I definitely, and then what I loved is that you were a brother who was willing to share, and you weren't funny with it. You weren't trying to be in a silo, or you weren't secretive. You were open and very warm and welcoming, and saying, "Hey, whatever you need." And you've always stuck by that. So I really appreciate you being here today. And thank you, because I can't say enough of what you've built there and the legacy that you've built and how it continues for the young men in Dallas. Now, why? Let's dig into that. Like, what was the importance of the Obama Academy for you? What was the importance of that?
Creating a private school education at a public school cost. When we think about our education systems, many times excuses in regards to where our kids aren't successful. Some people try to lean on the communities. Some people try to lean on the education system. Some people try to put it on the parents. But when we look at collectively the resources that are available, the resources that are available and not available historically in minority neighborhoods, it is the decisions that we make as adults. And so in regards to those decisions, why not have not only high expectations for the students, but as ourselves, as the practitioners, given the gift to educate our students, our young men and our young women.
So what is it that you knew you had to do differently there if you wanted it to be successful compared to, I know South Oak Cliff a little bit, right? And I know
Yes, sir.
some of the struggles South Oak Cliff, that area has, and some of the struggles the schools have there,
Yes,
but you were able to do something different there. What did you know you had to do to make that work?
Transform not only the mindset of the young men, but more importantly of the community. And so not only were we educating and equipping those young men there at the campus, we were equipping their parents. Barack Obama's Dallas ISD is a public school. And so the expectation and more importantly, the education that happened for the parents was the same quality of education your son is going to receive here. You need to not only demand, but also expect it in the schools that your other children may attend, that your kinfolk and or just your neighborhood schools. We are taxpayers, and by way of us being taxpayers, there are certain expectations that we have of our leaders, but more importantly, also expectations of the services, and in this instance, the education that our kids receive.
So how much of a fight and struggle was that, or did it just, or am I assuming? So am I making a ass out of me and you, or was it a fight?
It was a consistent character building moment. We recognize, historically, again, what hasn't existed and or wasn't expected and or made available for our schools, more specifically, our culture. And it was just the understanding that we're going to not only learn from the best, but we're going to create the best. And in creating the best, there were the expectations that happened with the faculty and staff in regards to additional professional development beyond the traditional calendar. There were the expectations of the parents not only signing the agreement and understanding what their sons are entering into, but also what they were entering into.
Wait, hold on. Let me ask you a question. I got to interject. So you
Yes,
mean
sir.
to tell me that your staff had to do more than they would traditionally do in a regular school? And you mean to tell me your parents had to do more than they would do in a regular school?
Yes, sir. In order to get what others don't get, you have to be willing to do what others won't do. And that was that commitment to educating those kids.
So
So in the instance,
why can't we get other schools to follow that? Why? Because, all right, so if we're talking about education being a new form of civil rights, So what I
Right.
heard already is my brother Nakia Douglas has said to me is that in order to get it done, we had to do more than what you're traditionally doing. We need that commitment from parents. We need that commitment from kids. We need that commitment from our educators. We need that commitment from administration. Did I hear you say that accurately?
Yes, sir. That's what you heard.
Okay. So why is it that and this was done in a traditional school district, which I have no problem. So, I'm in the charter school world now, and I
Correct.
have been for about 12 years, but I
Correct.
come from the public school district, and I don't care about charter public. I care about good
Right.
schools.
Right.
So, but I know to be a good school or to be a great school, you have to go above and beyond. Why is it that our traditional schools, if we're saying if education is the greatest equalizer, why aren't we willing as adults to do what it takes to be that equalizer? What is the fight for?
The fight is for not only the students, but for our communities, and more importantly, for ourselves.
But
You
why
know,
are they
we
fighting us? Why does the traditional system say? Because you know what? When you went, and I'm going to speculate. You tell me if
yes,
I'm
sir.
wrong. You tell me to shut up and mind my business. But I'm going to speculate that when you went into that big fancy role over all them other schools, and you said, "Guess what? I'm going to put all this stuff into place, and we're going to do this at 12 schools because I know how it's done, and I've done it, and y'all get with me if y'all want to be successful." And then they said to you, I'm guessing again, I don't know, allegedly, right? They said to you, no, Mr. Douglas, we can't do all that here, or that's not going down, or they did a little nipple twister and they made it so a little painful for you. They made it hurt. So what come on, man, give me the real. What happened when you went to the larger role and you tried to do that? Were they
So
hearing you?
with the larger role, that was what was interesting. They wanted what Obama had, and I told them, I said, it's a different type of work. It's a different type of expectations. There are no sacred cows, and so we're going to call a spade, whether it's at the leadership level, at the instructional level, more the support staff level, and also the student level. And in understanding that, we're going to peel back some of this onion, and it's going to make you cry a little bit, but the only way we're going to improve the outcomes for our students and for our communities is addressing those challenging areas, and more importantly, improving upon those. So
When you
initially,
did that, though, what was
there
their
was
reaction?
some pushback from some, but once they understood the heart and the essence of the work, and we were able to turn around
That's
five.
being politically correct, y'all. Y'all notice he on the gut of the greatness, and he said there was some pushback. Now he ain't talking about what the pushback was. Tell us about when Miss Such and Such, what they do to you, brother. I know they gave you a hard time. I know they gave you a paddle in the office.
Well,
Because they still like to do that in Texas. They carry around the loaded gun and then threaten you a little bit. What they do, man? Come on, give me something.
no, the real reality of it was, when you are working with principals and working with teachers and they've gotten comfortable and you're taking them out of their comfort zone, they're going to do one or two things. They're going to step up and understand their role as a leader, as an educator, or it's going to make them so uncomfortable where they're going to start fussing. They're going to start pushing back. Why are you expecting this? And this is just something real small. When I would go visit my campus principals, I would first 2 weeks, I would give them my schedule. This is the school I'm coming to visit. I'm doing this. And after about 2 weeks' time, I stopped doing it. And they were like, why are you doing that? I said, well, I want you to understand something about the psychology of this work that we're doing. I said, if the only time that your teachers get up and teach and perform with excellence, when you get on that announcements and say there's a wild dog in the yard or the eagle has landed, meaning that you're identifying that the executive director is here, that means I'm running the school and not you. And so therefore, what do we need you for? Just that mindset with those leaders of understanding that excellence in their classroom should be there at all times, regardless of whether it was myself as the executive director or the superintendent coming into the building. They are the master of their fates, the captain of their souls of those campuses. And so it's that understanding that they step more into those roles so that not only their students would see them as that leader, that main instructional guider of all excellence at the campus, but more importantly, the faculty and staff, and ultimately the community. And changing that mindset with the adults led to a changed mindset with the students. And so
Amen.
therefore, when that mindset is changed, you can move in greatness. You can expect greatness, and you can know that greatness is going to come to fold.
And when you start to see the shift, and you see the shift, because and that's what I preach it, but I wanted somebody else to come on here and talk about that. It means that it's bigger. I wanted somebody to talk about it who isn't in the charter world, because in the traditional public world, they say, oh, this can't be done, or this can't be done like that. But it's about making commitment to do more than you've ever done, and to do it differently, but do it in a way that's going to work with our kids. So once you get the adults bought in, you get the kids buying in, then talk to me about when you started to see the shift of the kids, and what happened. How did their lives start to change through this educational shift? What did that look like?
You start seeing greater engagement. We question in regards to why students are not engaged, because the adults leading the work aren't engaged. I am a model. We are all mirrors of what we see and understand and what we believe in life. And so if you walk into a classroom and the teacher has a cookie cutter scripted lesson that they didn't design for themselves, you're going to get a receptive audience and or a non-receptive audience that reflects the power and the passion of their teachers. And so therefore my principals began to reflect my expectations. They began to reflect and understanding this new culture and paradigm of what public education should and could be, not only for their campuses, but for our entire feeder pattern. And in doing so, that became the linchpin of getting us to the next level of understanding. And so therefore, the legacies that exist now across the feeder pattern is exactly where it's supposed to be at, from that perspective of dropping and planting that seed early on, watering and nurturing it, coaching and or coaching out individuals that were not actively on board with the work, to make sure that the best emphasis and, more importantly, the ultimate goal was educating with excellence our students and community.
All right. Just thinking about this, do you have your own gutter to greatness story? Like the raw and gritty version? Like where did little Nakia start at? And what did that look like, man? Tell us about your own gutter to greatness story.
So if most people may have been to Dallas and or they say South Dallas, and normally when people say South Dallas, they encompass everything from South Dallas, anything south of 30 here in Dallas. Well, I grew up in South Dallas. If you're a native of Dallas, you know the hood. And so my life journeys was just from the gutter to greatness. Everything that I've sought to build out for our students and community, I was first gen, single parent household. We didn't own anything, right? Matter of fact, when we talk about generational wealth and well-being, I was the first in my family to own a home, first in my family to graduate from college. And so when I think about from where I came to where I am now, I think that's also part of the hunger that keeps me going, because I don't want my kids to know the struggle that I had. My wife didn't have the struggle that I had growing up. What they say, the yin and the yang. She grew up with both parents. I grew up in a single parent household. They owned homes. We didn't own. And so there was just a tenacity that I think I maintain and I still maintain to this day that reminds me of where I came from. Honestly, my mom sacrificed for my sister and I to be in private school from kindergarten to 8th grade. And I think about it, a couple of years back, several of my classmates, we got together. They were like, we don't remember you being that bad, but why were you always in the office? And I just had to laugh and tell them, whenever my mom couldn't pay the tuition, they would take me out of class. But there were teachers and administrators around that campus that saw something in me, that understood, I guess, I was destined for greatness, and they would sneak me my work. And literally, I used to try to tell my mom, leave my sister there. I know everybody in the neighborhood, I'll be good. I can go to neighborhood schools. And she was like, no, she said, because that was her experience and she wanted something better for her kids. So when we think about just a generational blessing and prayers that are prayed upon us, sometimes it's the sacrifices of our parents that teach us and enable us, or community members that teach us and enable us to see a better life for ourselves and ultimately continue to fight for it. So when I think about, again, that gutter to greatness, I am because of the shoulders of the elders and the giants that came before me and that provided opportunities for me, which I feel is part of my responsibility now. To them who much is given, much is required. And so what we're talking about when we're talking about coming from gutter to greatness, we recognize those people that open the doors for us. We recognize and understand those people that cleared a path for us and prayed for us. And now it's our responsibility to give back to make sure the next generation has the same doors open and or more doors.
Right. And having those doors open and then doing something with it like you've done is the key. And that's even what this platform is for, is because we're trying to move from the gutter to greatness, but we're trying to shift people's mindsets to move as well. And that's the biggest struggle for me is getting people to believe that it's them. Like it starts with, but a lot of it is the trauma that we go through, especially as Black men. We go through trauma that people don't even understand. Was there a real traumatic experience in your life that where you wanted to give up and where you could have and you just and why didn't you? Like what did that look like? Going through that trauma could be a lot. Maybe there wasn't. I don't know. Was there?
Most of our stories talk about the single parents, but some people have that memory and or a moment where it was triggered most, where you transition from being a kid to what we call a man child. And I was 4 years old. My sister was 2 weeks old when my dad left and said he was going to get some cigarettes. And I knew then he wasn't coming back. And so, we think about those tragic moments and looking back on it, I wouldn't even say it was a tragic moment. It was a compelling moment that propelled me to greatness and excellence. I took on that responsibility early on, and I won't necessarily say I accepted my childhood the way I did because I felt that I had to be the man of the house, even though I was basically a baby myself. And so many young men in our communities and young ladies at different times in their lives aren't afforded the opportunity to be kids. When we think about how the justice system looks at our kids, if someone of a different persuasion does a crime, oh, that young man, young woman, they're learning, they're still needing to grow, and we're needing to provide them time. They just made a mistake. Whereas when young men and young women from communities of color may make the same mistake, they're throwing the book at them. They're giving them adult sentences, and or you are set up in a systemic process to where it's 10 times harder for you to just be recognized as a kid that's still learning the processes. And so I'll say that intentionality early on gave me that same tenacity, intentionality as I became an educator. And so whether I was a classroom teacher, assistant principal, even to my role now at the university, I've always sought to bring and create the best opportunities for our kids that historically they wouldn't have access to. Because I know by way of that exposure, there's going to be the increased expectations and ultimately increased excellence. That's going to be the outcome for those students and participants.
Is what I talk about a lot on this platform is that your excuse becomes your reason, right? Instead of having your excuse be the excuse, it becomes your reason. And what I'm finding are people who are successful are usually because of their mental toughness. And
Yes,
so, like I heard you say, your dad left at 4, and you knew that as a young child, you knew he wasn't coming back, and that probably created all kinds of issues and trauma. So, what do you think you needed to heal from that trauma? What did the healing process look like? Because a lot of our brothers are scared to talk about that.
That healing process took time. I mean, it came in different phases. I'll say initially, a part of that healing process were just the people I surrounded myself with. My homeboys and homegirls that, most of us were going through the same journey. And so we just kind of filled the gap for each other. And then you think about, my mom, she was insistent that, we may live in South Dallas, but South Dallas doesn't have to live in you. So therefore, I'm going to expose you to different opportunities. And you are going to college. And so therefore, that insistence upon her was, first, we're going to sacrifice. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to make it work. You're going to go to private school and all of this. And again, I hated it. I hated the uniforms. I hated being ostracized from my friends. But it wasn't until we be in the neighborhood, playing, running around, and we get to talk about school in the midst of that. I'm like, I did this at school. And they were like, well, we did that. What you mean? You're in the same grade as me. And I knew they were more capable than I was. I wasn't the smartest kid. I just would outwork everyone. And so when I would see them not have the same opportunities, I'm like, well, no, why don't they do that in the public schools? Or why don't they do that at your schools? So fast forward to high school, I was a neighborhood kid. I was at my neighborhood high school, but I just so happened to be a part of the magnet program. And in that, there was just a constant reiteration of what excellence is, not only for those of us that were in the magnet component program of the campus, but more importantly for the comprehensive. And so I was at the school at Lincoln during a time where our test scores were so good that the state made us retest. And we had that transparent leader, father figure of a principal, Dr. Napoleon B. Lewis, that talked to us about why we had to do it, but more importantly, reminded us they don't think y'all intelligent. They don't think nothing great comes from South Dallas. And so not only did we retest, but when we retested, our scores went up. So it was hearing from a leader that was transparent with the struggle of what he was dealing with at his level, that reiterated that this man cares about us. This man cares about our education. Yeah, not only are we going to show him that we're great, we're going to show the whole state that we're great.
And that motivation, somebody believing in you, that means so much. And that's why we got to believe in our kids. And I'm believing that they're going to hopefully listen to some of these things, and they're going to use this as their reason instead of their excuse to move forward and develop some of that mental toughness. You know what? I am curious though. Did you ever get a chance to have a conversation with your father?
That's how God works. They say if you want to make God laugh, you tell him your plan versus his. So part of my journey into young adulthood was the decision I made, and actually the decision that four of us, myself and three friends from Lincoln High School, we accepted scholarships to Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina. Well, I had opportunities to stay in Texas, surrounding states and things of that nature. And that's really what my mom preferred, because she wanted me to be somewhere where she could kind of control the narrative and or knew people that were going to be a part of my extended village. I wanted to go somewhere where she didn't have no access and didn't understand and or couldn't control what that narrative was. And so when we accepted the scholarship to Livingstone, only two of us went on a visit. Two of our friends went sight unseen. They accepted the scholarships, and we knew it was just the four of us, so we had to get it. Even though we were on scholarship, this was our true transition into young adulthood to manhood, where we recognize at an even deeper level, at a spiritual level, that this is our journey and we have to be the owners of it. So fast forward, after graduating and accepting the teaching job, throughout all my life, my mom would always tell me, no matter what, that's your dad. My great grandmother would always tell me, as she was getting older, I'm not going to always be here, but when you come home, you need to spend some time with your dad. The toughest part, again, when I talk about healing in different seasons, the second part of my healing came after finding my faith again after graduating from college and coming home when my dad had a stroke. Again, he'd been on dialysis on and off my teenage years, and I would go and see the dialysis center, but it was kind of hit or miss because I felt fourth, 1999, my mom called and said he had a stroke. I was home by the 29th, walking to the hospital room. My mom right there by his side. He couldn't say anything. He had a stroke. Tear fell out his eye. And I made the decision to come home to take care of my dad. Wow. The reason I made that decision was based off me finding out while I was in college the reason why he left. How would you potentially raise a child that wasn't yours? So all those years I went hating him, I kind of just started becoming reflective of what would my life have been had he been there and had animosity towards me as a child and misguided me. And I went down a different path. All those years that, I didn't hear his side of the story or understand, the why behind it, I had a guilt to it. And so in coming home, God equips us for everything. He has a plan for everything in our lives. And so I left a class of 29 kindergarten students to a class of 1 because how God equipped me, everything my dad needed to learn from his stroke, I taught as a kindergarten teacher. So for a month and a half, I had my house, the family house, labeled like a kindergarten classroom. I have an older sister and a younger sister. My older sister was living in Dallas at the time. And so once my money started getting short, I did what I do. I got to get back into the classroom. And so I started teaching, but we had set up a system where he still went to dialysis, got all his physical therapy, but she would keep him during the week and I would get him on weekends. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife of 22 years, uh, she saw something in me that I didn't see at the time because I was a broken man trying to repair a broken relationship. But that was two of the best years of my life because um, he saw some things, and I think my family saw some things, and friends saw some things in regards to my transformation deeper into manhood and understanding my role not only for myself, but more importantly for my family. And taking care of my dad was probably the best gift. The first time he met my wife when we were dating, he told me, Doug, she the one. I'm looking at him. We looking at each other like, no, we just dating. And she walked off um, to the restroom. And he said, no, Doug, she the one. That was his first time meeting her. So
Wow.
again, the voice of the elders, the prayers of the elders, not only will equip you, but more importantly, they can guide you into your future. And so that's why it's so important that we reach back and be that voice, guidance, and also provide prayers and leadership for the generation coming after us.
So what did you see change after you started the healing process? Like, and I think that coming to that ownership and that understanding with your dad, and and then starting the healing process, what changed, if anything?
Number one, not only just my relationship with him, but it helped me see myself through others and my relationship with them. Um, Prior to moving back to Dallas, I was a little different in regards to how I dated. Like, I kind of compartmentalized women. Um, and literally, it was not only moving back to Dallas, but prior to moving back to Dallas, a couple of my homeboys that I transitioned from high school to college with, we're living our lives. We're, through college, we're graduating and going into our professional careers. And it was one of my homeboys, Lorenzo, and his wife, Jill, that says, hey, man, you can't keep putting women in a box. I'm like, I don't put women in a box. They're like, no, if they're not perfect, you want to move on and go to the next. And they were like, in all actuality, it's you. I'm sitting there like, where this coming from? And they literally told me, they said, my godson, who's 26 now, they said, Zion's not going to be around all these young ladies. Uh, you're just not going to do that. You can come around, but you can't bring them around.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hearing this, and I'm finding my faith. I'm getting ready to move back to Dallas, and I'm like, man, what in the world going on? Why my folk calling me out like this? But when you're in a U-Haul driving 18 and a half hours and the radio go out and you have to think about yourself and think about all those past relationships that may have worked and or didn't work, and you taking on this new responsibility of taking care of a man that you know little nothing about, and you're understanding yourself or trying to learn to understand yourself, you're gonna grow up. And
Mm-hmm.
literally, that was like one of those points of epiphany that it's time for me to grow up. And I can't ask a woman to be something for me that I'm not willing to be for myself. So therefore, I came into the understanding that I can't love anyone else. I can't believe or lead anyone else. So I first love, believe, and lead myself. And as I grew more in that understanding and grew more in my faith in regards to, this path that I was on, that was part of that equipping. And so sometimes our greatest lessons, are outside the noise. It takes traumatic events to wake us up, but sometimes it takes moments of silence and solitude for us to truly understand why we went through what we did to move to the next level.
So like, and I hear that healing process began, and you had, and I had another guest that talked about, it being a traumatic event or something spiritual happening, right? And
Right.
then those things make you want to shift to do something different. I heard you also say that you don't want to be complacent, that you're hungry, that you want to do something, and you want to outwork people, you want to work hard, all things that help you move towards, from the gutter and that gutter mindset to being great. But why do you think that so many of our young brothers today are stuck and give the perception that they're okay being okay?
I'll say exactly what you just said. Sometimes that traumatic event and or they haven't become reflective yet, just hadn't sinked in yet, or they haven't been allowed the space to for it to sink in. You know, when you're in survival mode, you're just trying to get it. And survival mode will bring about a tenacity, but more importantly, it can sometimes bring about a selfishness to where it's solely for you. And so therefore, I'm gonna go at it by any means necessary, regardless of who I gotta cut off or who I'm stepping over and stepping on. But when you add in that reflective component and you're able to think and remember and reflect over where you came from, you know, from the gutter to greatness, it gives you a different perspective of life. And I understand in this portion of my career, uh, I'm more of a coach and a guide versus that sage on the stage. And so,
Mhm.
therefore, I know some of the spaces that I'm in are is to be exactly like this. It's time for me to just sit down with some young brothers and young sisters and just ask them what their hopes and dreams are. You know, where those dreams initiated, and helping guide them toward those. And in helping guide them toward their goals, in my instance, as an educator, that means the greatest beneficiaries will always be the students and communities that we serve. And so, by way of investing in the adults that are doing the work on the front lines, it becomes a greater outcome for the next generation. You know, the greatest example of that are my own kids. My kids attend schools where I was the executive director. Well, before I was executive director, I was peers with those principals. So we went through the ranks together, either as a teacher and or they witnessed my growth as a campus administrator. And so when I got ready to leave and transition to the university level, even before that, I said we need to create schools that we would educate our own kids in. And so when my kids, my own personal kids, were attending those schools, they were like, "Oh, you were serious?" I was like, "No, I'm dead serious. If we've done this work correctly, and I've equipped you as a leader and to lead your staff, and not only be beneficial to the students of your school, it should be great enough for me to put my own kids there." And my kids attend those campuses now.
Well, that's important.
Yes,
But
sir.
so, tell me how you feel about this statement. And so, most young Black kids and Black families in the urban environment do not make education a priority and could care less about school. How do you feel about that?
That's a historical weight that we're carrying in regards to what the public education experience has been historically with our communities. When we think about not only K-12 but higher ed, they weren't initially built for us. Those institutions of higher education were not built for us. They were. It was okay for us to build them, but not for us to be educated in them. And so, even when we think about when we started having public education, uh, there was a time during segregation that we were our strongest because we knew it was for us, by us, and relied on us. And so, therefore, when that complacency started setting in, and not only were we integrated, but ultimately our students started having success, you start seeing the lack of resources. You start seeing a greater transition of students and families to private schools to segregate those opportunities. And so now what that looks like in regards to conversation of education being the new civil rights movement, uh, there's a slowly there's a slow lack of investment in public education. Well, what families and communities are primarily in our public education systems?
Hmm.
Blacks and Hispanics. So therefore, we're not going to fund something that's going to level the playing field. You know, let's get this money. Let's set up vouchers to where the students that we do allow to be amongst us can bring that funding with us. Yes, we do pay taxes in these communities, but now we want our money in the private schools. What's happening for those families who don't have that generational wealth and or the generational education that are stuck in our public schools, that are stuck within our charter schools? And I don't mean, and I apologize for saying the word stuck, that is still there. It's going to take educators like ourselves with platforms like this to insist upon excellence regardless of the resources. You know, when we
Right.
were our greatest, it was when we always had the least resources. because we understood the importance of education. So it's just like going into the refrigerator. If your refrigerator's full, you comfortable, you good. But when you and I grew up, those refrigerators weren't always full. So we
Mhm.
stayed hungry. And that hunger led us. I may be eating served sandwiches now, but when I get older, I'm going to have a steak. I'm going to have this. And so I had something to dream towards. But if everything is right in front of me right now, yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm fat. I'm lazy. But let that rug come from under me. What we're witnessing now in regards to the reversal of civil rights legislation and decisions in higher ed and other decisions that are happening across the country is really the Great Awakening. So when they say they don't want us to be woke, you waking us up anyway, because now innately that hunger is causing a new form of commitment and focus to become an entrepreneur, to get my doctorates, to become the greatest politician you may have ever seen. So innately, they're waking us up.
Right. So what makes you free and not a slave to the system then?
You mind? My mom used to always tell me, they can't take away what's in here. And there was that old saying in our communities, you want to hide something from a black man or black people in general, you put it in a book. Once I understood that I could travel the world with a book, once I understood that with my education, doors that were historically closed are now open, that was transformative for me. And so therefore, again, once I'm having those little seeds planted talking to my homeboys and homegirls back as a kid, why are you not doing this at your school? I started, wanting more from my homeboys and homegirls. So those homeboys and homegirls, as I became a teacher and moved back to Dallas, and even when I was in North Carolina, I saw those kids as an extension of my friends. Okay, they wouldn't get it anywhere else. If you're in Mr. Douglas' classroom, you're going to get it. When I became an assistant principal, we need books, we need these textbooks, and other schools have it. I'm going to make sure I order and make sure that we have everything else. And I'm also going to put in the understanding of what a safe and secure environment will look like. And then when I became a campus principal, I'm going to go and study the public and private schools and charter schools that are the best across the nation. And if we don't have it in our community, we're going to bring it.
Right.
And what we want in our community, we're going to create, or we're going to establish the relationships to ensure that our kids have its exposure, so that excellence and expectations would increase, not only for themselves, but for our entire community.
But that slave mindset, that broken learned helplessness that happens because of the continuation of the generational poverty cycle that has been pushed upon us, that mindset, I would say, is contagious. And when I say contagious, mean is caught on kind of like COVID. And when I say that, if I had to give a percentage, and I could be wrong, so what do I know? But if I had to give a percentage, I would say at least 70% of our urban communities, maybe even higher, especially in our Black and brown neighborhoods, in our lower income areas, the mindset towards education needs a real strong shift. And they all are filled with this virus. They're all filled with this COVID virus in terms of their mindset. And that was intentional. It was that. So how do we get this? Because there's a percentage of folks that's on it, that's breaking the cycle, but there's too many of us that are stuck. How do you get that 70% unstuck? What does that look like to you?
You reach them where you think they can't be reached. You go where others don't go. So in this instance, podcasts, entertainment, the different platforms, social media platforms that the students are on, or that the families are on. We have to redefine and redesign, our approaches. What worked for us as kids doesn't work for this next generation. And so sometimes it is, okay, I'm going into school recruiting students for a program, and the principals already have kids already identified. Oh, that's good, that's fine. But honestly, I want the ones you haven't identified. What do you mean you want the ones you haven't identified? I want the ones you really don't know. I want the ones that are on the bubble or below the bubble, that are just existing within your schools and potentially about to fall through the cracks. those are the ones we want to expose to this. We know you already have systems in place for those that, as W.B. Du Bois would say, the talented 10th. You give me the ones that aren't a part of the talented 10th and allow us to support and serve them. That little drop right there, where this principal and or this campus administrator and or district is saying, okay, good, we already got our plan for these over here. We'll give them those over there and we'll just see what happens. When there's that expected excellence in programming and the educators that are in front of them and the resources that become available, now you have an entire group that's moving up simultaneously. Yes, this group may have had the initial advantage, but what we're about to pour into them, the others, in a non-traditional exploratory opportunity that is meeting and filling the gaps that aren't filled within our schools and or in some instances in our homes and communities, that's transformative. This summer, we took 38 students on a college tour to Missouri. Of that 38, I believe only 30 of them had ever been outside of the state of Texas. Last summer, we took about 80 students to Washington, D.C. They flew to Washington, D.C. Of that 80 students, maybe 85% of them had never been on a plane before. So when you're creating transformative experiences like that, it's imprinted. So that first imprint we were talking about were those traumatic past and those traumatic experiences, that lit a fire within them. The other fire that we're lighting is the enlightenment and exposure to opportunities that our students had never had. And so therefore, that first one got them to the door. The second experience is not only getting them in the door, but now they are propping the door open for others to come behind them because they've been liberated through the power of their minds through education.
Right. And so, like, you're doing great work. So how do you plan on changing the mindsets of folks, even though I know you're not in the classroom anymore?
Creating spaces where educators, community members, and leaders, regardless of what their background and or focus is, to authentically grow for themselves.
Right.
But more importantly, bringing them from a cyclical mentality, putting them in front of our young men and young women that don't see or understand that. Similar to what you're doing right here with this podcast. You've had several guests that have come on and shared their story from gutter to greatness that some students may not have ever even thought about. How many people, are have a podcast and educators are sitting there talking about education and its impact, but more importantly, where they came from. Because when they first look on the line, they're thinking, we're two, men that were born with silver spoons in our mouths. But no, we're talking about, yeah, exactly. But when they understand these squares had to be polished and could have easily went the other way. When I first came to higher ed, I had one of my peers. I didn't tell her about, my prior experiences. And so we were sitting at a luncheon one day and she said, why you tell me everything you did at the K-12 side? I said, well, that was part of my journey then. I said, I'm in higher ed and I'm learning everything. I said, and so I'm having to build and establish a new legacy. And she says, yeah, she said, but the difference between you and us? And I said, what's that? She said, 3 letters. And I knew where she was going with that, but I let her finish. I said, well, what 3 letters? She said, PhD. And I looked at her, I said, 3 letters, but not those. And she kind of looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, 3 letters, but not those. She said, what 3 letters? I said, G-O-D. And she looked at me, she like, what, huh? I said, because if God hadn't put the right people in my life, well, you seeing me as a savior, I could have been your worst nightmare because I was savvy enough and intelligent enough and hungry enough where I could have went left where I chose to go right. What we create and what we stand for right now, yourself and so many others, we are the ones that have the opportunity to push students in the right direction versus allowing them to go left. And it's that understanding that to them who much is given, much is required. We have a responsibility to do what we're doing. We have a call. We have a legacy. We are standing upon the dreams and the shoulders of our ancestors. And we are the griots that are passing down the knowledge of the power of education through the liberation of our people through our passions and our purpose. And so whether the next young man or young lady has found their purpose through the power of education, we get to curate those experiences. Whether the career known to man gets to create every professional that moves forward in the world outside of a teacher and an educator. That's the blessing of what we get to do every day.
That's a blessing. And you said something like, I'm going to go back for a minute, because you said, that they get to hear our stories, and see that we really gutter. So I'm going to test your gutter for a second.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, you gutter win, right? And so you said something earlier that I was like, okay, this brother got a little gutter in him. He said, you gutter when you only could eat a syrup sandwich. And he said it with the syrup sandwich.
Syrup sandwich.
Syrup sandwich.
Or if you had bologna with the ring on and you let it cook and it pop up in the middle.
When you peel the ring off and then it starts bubbling, and then you melt the welfare cheese on it and toast it, right? So
it didn't melt; it just toasted.
When your mama comes to school with her bonnet on and her pajamas and about to whoop your butt because she ain't even up all the way yet. Like,
yes,
with the bonnet and it's looking crazy. Eyelash falling off like that. It's about to go down.
Yes, sir.
There's something about to happen.
So think about what you just said.
Right.
Historically, it came back, but in a different format, where we knew when we saw that bonnet, we were in trouble. Mm-hmm. Now, with this next generation, which is, again, just the power of the innovation, now they want to wear a bonnet or they want to wear those robes because it's cool. They created a new perspective of what it meant. So while we need to teach them, appropriateness, while we need to teach them, expectations, really it's bringing back what we saw just from a different context. Right. And they didn't understand or haven't been exposed to the knowledge of, if this happened in the past, you were in trouble. Now you all are doing it to be cool. Well, we're going to change that entire paradigm to where you understand and value the power of education in that setting. And not only will it be the adults expecting great education from the teachers and the leaders of the school, more important, when you got them young men and young women sitting in those classrooms and they start challenging teachers to educate them more, if they're not doing so, then you got a transformative, collaborative experience that's happening both directions.
Right. And if you had to give like 3 things that someone could duplicate to start shifting to their own greatness, what if you had some takeaways that you want people to walk away with, they're shifting their mindset, what are those takeaways?
First, learning to believe, lead, and love themselves before they believe, lead, and love, or look to believe, lead, and love someone else. And that could take a lot of different perspectives in regards to finding a belief in a higher power, understanding their traumas and getting the necessary assistance through counseling, and or just being open to hear from mentors, elders, and or wise peers that are amongst them. Secondly, value the power of what education can do and learn and see and find your space in those areas. And I'm not just talking about formal education. We have a lot of geniuses within our communities that just have gone untapped. When we think about, our dope boys and dope girls and pimps and hustlers, some of them are some of the most intelligent people. They just found a different way to enterprise their personal passions to make funding that some would consider illegal. Finding out spaces and ways to curate and bring those persons back to the fold so that they can find their excellence. And then lastly, finding your purpose. Everybody's not going to be a teacher. Everybody's not going to be a politician. Everybody's not going to be an attorney. But whatever you are doing, if you love it, you'll be okay where you may not make a lot of money at first, but I'm doing something I love. And so as I become a master of my craft, a master of my faith, you will pay me. And so when I think about, again, from that gutter to greatness, when I first started teaching, especially kindergarten in North Carolina, I wasn't making no money. I went into my career with a part-time job.
Mm-hmm. I started off at 33,000. I think making 33. I think $33,200. I thought I was rich, man.
You making me feel old, or North Carolina really got over on me, because when I first started teaching, I was making 19,000 a year.
Oh, good Lord!
Exactly, and it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am with a degree that I followed the path of what everybody was telling me to do, and literally I could barely pay rent and all my bills. I had to have a roommate just to survive when we first came out. But the beauty of that struggle, I was doing something I loved. I became a kindergarten teacher because I saw my mom run a daycare when I was a little kid. So everybody was wondering, well, why'd you do early childhood? If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it good, and I'm gonna do what I know and I'm most comfortable with and what I'm most passionate about. So if I can teach these young ones and build a foundation there, then I can do and carry that trajectory for the rest of their lives and for myself as well. And that was the springboard of me doing something that I love. And so if I didn't have a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage, I could do what I do for free. But since I have them, I need that check every once a month.
The check must reflect, right? And
that check must reflect.
That takes me to our mindfulness minute as we kind of close out here. And in our mindfulness minute, but before I even get there, I got to say thank you to you for being on here today, man. I think you dropped a lot of gems. I think some great inspiration for our audience, and truly what you do is phenomenal, and the hard work and just the brother that you are. Thank you for what you do, and appreciate you being here. And in mindfulness minute, I think I would want my audience to know that education, there's a future. A lot of us don't want to be educators anymore. And a lot of it is because you have to go through some crazy requirements. You're not connected to the why of it, and you don't think you're going to make a lot of money. Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't have to be broke as an educator. This brother next to me got stacks he's sitting on, and I don't want to put his business out there, but I'm sure he does well. I do well. And the point is that at the end of the day, you could do well too. It's all how your mindset and the ability to reinvent and become the best at something. And so you don't have to be broke to be an educator. It burns me up when districts always get mad about superintendent salaries. So how, and I say, oh, this superintendent makes $200 and something thousand or 300, whatever they make, and they're angry about it, and I can understand if they're not performing. I get that, because who's going to keep somebody around the head of a company that's not performing? However, if they are performing and they're getting results, how many CEOs of companies do you know that work for less than a couple $100,000? They don't. They climb to get there, and they deserve it because they're leading thousands of people, hundreds of people. They're leading people. They're leading kids. They're leading. They're helping change so many futures and so many lives. So why not command that salary? Education, you don't got to be broke. And so with that, we got to stop believing that, but our mindset's got to change, and our mindset's got to stop being broke. And to change that, we need more of us in education. We need you to think about it differently and get involved. In the same way this brother knew from kindergarten that he wanted to be an educator, that it was going to change somebody's lives. And I knew from the time I was in high school, going into college, that I wanted to be in education, change somebody's life. We need you. We need you to give back and change some people's lives, and understand that you have the greatest opportunity, like this brother said again, to educate anybody in every profession out there. So anybody who is a doctor, lawyer, entertainer, rapper, or as you all want to be, they all had to go through a classroom and get a teacher. So with that, you have the ability to change lives. And so I really ask you to seriously think about becoming an educator and becoming educated and changing your mindset, so that we can use this new form of civil rights to rise up and be the people that we're supposed to be. So I want to thank everybody for listening. This has been another episode from the Gutter to Greatness. Tune in and just be with us, man. We got an episode coming weekly to y'all. We're going to bring that fire. We're going to bring that heat. We're going to bring that change in your mindset. Until next time, peace.
That's it for today's episode. So head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener that posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing for a $25,000 private epic VIP day with Dr. Miller himself. Be sure to head on over to guttertogreatness.com and pick up a free copy of Dr. Miller's gift and join us on the next episode.